In December of 2006, Weekly Shonen Jump began serialization of a manga called Ral Grad. When I first saw this cover, I found it so enticing I just had to know more about it. And upon reading the synopsis, my interest was piqued. A fantasy story of a boy who harnesses the shadow of an almighty dragon. Both of them vow to fight against the shadow beast that plagued the world that imprisoned them. I found Ral Grad good, but wasn't anything groundbreaking in the fantasy or battle genre. It is a shonen with god-tier art. But then I noticed something. This manga had a similar premise to an anime I saw years ago when I was a kid. An anime called Blue Dragon. It was an anime that aired on Cartoon Network during the mid-2000s, so I was confused that a manga with this premise could exist. A quick Google search later, and sure enough, the manga Ral Grad was loosely based on the series Blue Dragon. But there was also a video game for Blue Dragon that was also released in 2006. I was aware of this, but I just chalked it up to being a video game anime adaptation of the series. Turns out, Blue Dragon the game is in fact the original source material. It was developed by Mistwalker from the creator of Final Fantasy, Hironobu Sakaguchi, and its character designs were illustrated by the creator of Dragon Ball, Akira Toriyama. From one obscure manga spawned this little web where I found an altogether different title at the center. With my curiosity sated, I went on with my daily life. Until I realized something. When I would go to the bookstore and look at the manga section, I always remembered seeing manga adaptations of video games. The ones that stood out were Persona 5 and The Legend of Zelda. I never stopped to think about it until Ral Grad, but if there are manga adaptations about IP as big as Zelda, but also really lesser known titles like Blue Dragon, does that mean there's a manga for every video game? And then it began. I started digging. I remembered Kingdom Hearts panels, a search later, a manga adaptation, an alternative light novel, sequels of both for every mainline Kingdom Hearts game, which if you know, there's a lot of them. I had to make sure it was smaller titles as well. I put in one of the most obscure PS2 games I could think of with a niche audience, Drakengard. Sure enough, a manga, a light novel. Okay, well, what about non-Japanese titles? A quick search later, and I find a 12-page Twitter manga based on Call of Duty Vanguard, illustrated by the creator of Fairy Tail. Alright, well, what about the titles I grew up with? Jak and Daxter? Nothing. Oh, thank God. Ratchet and Clank? My God, what did they do to you? But amongst this mental breakdown, something occurred to me. Some of these titles I mentioned are PS2 games. If there are PS2 games, when did this begin? How deep does this rabbit hole go? I go to Anime Planet. I filter all manga by based on a video game, and I go to the last page. And I saw some familiar faces. Metroid, Zelda. And there it was. It began in 1986. To some of you, the licensing of video games into manga being a large part of entertainment in Japan may not be a big deal or revelation to you. I also thought the same. But this rabbit hole of manga I had discovered made me think about this a little differently. So in this video, I want to talk about how these video game adaptations came to be, the odd ones I found in my deep tumble of research, and why Japan does this media tie-ins more than any other country, and is the reason more than just money. So sit down and grab a drink as we look at the bizarre world of video game manga. To begin, let's look at the 80s. a time much loved for its explosion of entertainment and popular culture, and in Japan, it was even bigger. Japan's economy was not only booming in the 80s, but so was its technology, innovating in so many other facets of life that other countries would look at Japan as a window into what the future of technology held. One such innovation was the home console that both the first Metroid and Zelda released on, the Famicom Disk System by Nintendo in 1986. At this time, manga was already an established entertainment avenue and was enjoying massive success. Specifically, and not surprised, Weekly Shonen Jump, with series like Fist of the North Star, Captain Tsubasa, Kinnikuman, and of course, Dragon Ball. Manga's adaptations were beginning to take real hold of their demographic, and alongside those anime shows were advertisements showcasing things that kids would want to have, like video games. With the release of titles like Metroid and Zelda, Wanpaku Comics sought to create strategy guides interlinked with their comics for elementary school kids who wanted the game, were struggling to complete it, or wanted more of it in a different way. Wanpaku, along with rival magazines like Comic Bomb Bomb and Koro Koro Comic, prioritized their magazines to feature toys and game systems to the elementary demographics. As far as I could tell, the licenses for Nintendo IP were a free-for-all, as you could see with Zelda. 2 different designs for Link from 2 different magazines. Now, at first, they were just commercial tie-ins to promote the games to those who didn't have them, but also rewarded those who did with comics that explained game mechanics and expanded the world with small stories. Those stories gave more exposition than a small bit system could do with text. Hell, even video game movies like The Goonies was a thing. So as time went on, and as video games evolved, so did their manga counterparts. But it wasn't until 1989 when Weekly Shonen Jump decided to create a video game tie-in of their own. Instead of a tie-in to promote the launch of a game and explain certain game mechanics or offer alternatives to the lack of story, they would make something new, almost original, with the release of Dragon Quest: The Adventure of Dai. I think it would be far-fetched to believe if you clicked on this video you haven't heard of Dragon Quest. Whether you have or haven't, we do have to reiterate the time in which this game was released and its impact. Since its inception on the Famicom Disk System, Dragon Quest became a standard template for video game developers to create the best RPG experiences. When Dragon Quest was created, it was very much inspired by tabletop RPGs and their computer counterparts like Ultima. After the first year of its release in '86, Dragon Quest would receive a sequel for each year after that, except for '89. Instead of a game, there was Dai. Adventure of Dai is a Dragon Quest story in the format of a shonen action-adventure template, which both work extremely well together. As Dai ventures on his journey to defeat the Demon King Hadler, he grows with experience and even learns abilities and spells that are synonymous with the games. To give you an idea of Dai's success, it's no low-ranking manga either. Dai ran for over 300 chapters, and as of 2022, has over 50 million copies in circulation. Now, I'm sure there were other series that tried this probably before Dai, and if they did, its success was not as huge. But the idea of taking an IP and either recontextualizing the story or creating an alternative new one to the games worked well. Really, really well. So other magazines would start to adapt Dragon Quest as well, retelling some of the games when they released and other IP. Mega Man, Fire Emblem, and Street Fighter, it just kept going. Magazines would take a chance on smaller titles like Snatcher, a visual novel video game created by the GOAT, Hideo Kojima. It soon became the standard that if a game retained any kind of success in Japan, a manga would surely follow. But before that, I want to thank today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp is an online service connecting you with a vast network of licensed therapists 24/7. Simplifying session setups, even on your phone, it allows for seamless text and call conversations, ensuring a robust connection with your therapist, especially when life tosses hurdles your way. BetterHelp therapists are quick to respond, offering the support you crave when you need it most. To ensure a perfect match, BetterHelp invites you to express your needs and wants through a thoughtful questionnaire. This personal approach guarantees pairing you with a therapist who truly gets you. And today, BetterHelp is extending a 10% discount on your first month with the code MUGAN. Having personally experienced the benefits of therapy in my youth and witnessed friends and family finding comfort in it, I can vouch for its effectiveness. In our hectic lives of today, finding time to talk can be a challenge, and BetterHelp bridges that gap. So head on over to betterhelp.com/Mugen, or just click the link in the description to start your first month at a 10% discount. That's betterhelp.com/Mugen. And a huge thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. Okay, back to those manga. There is a clear abundance of video game manga out there, but I want to highlight some that I have found and read bits and pieces of that aren't only retellings of the license they are based on. The first I want to mention is the adaptation of Kingdom Hearts. I grew up with this series and its needlessly overly complex and convoluted plot. To see Kingdom Hearts adapted into another format is bewildering, and even with the character design matching that of Disney characters is solid. There isn't much of this that is different from the game itself though. If anything, it was like speedrunning the game, but without any game. It's a shame because of how dynamic the action of Kingdom Hearts can be. Seeing it on the page would have been amazing. But the comedy is so much better in this manga than the games, changing the character designs to match the tone and the jokes that are being represented, as well as using it to better introduce wacky characters from all different worlds. One such wacky character intro goes to my man, Sid, who after hearing Heartless attack the door of his accessory shop, decides to retaliate with a beam blast from an oversized firearm dubbed the Sid Cannon. If I was much younger and still a diehard fan of the series, I would be over the moon to see manga versions of every single title that has released in the series. But one thing that is interesting about these adaptations is when you aren't a fan of a series. There are many games that release, and when they do, I see people gather around them because it's doing something that is unlike anything else. And sometimes I want to try it out so I can appreciate that as well. So after talking to friends of mine who love everything from software and told me about how much they love Elden Ring, I decided to give it a try. Made it the farthest I ever had in a game of punishing battles to then say, I don't like it. Sorry. But would you imagine my surprise to learn about a manga from Kadokawa with the same name? And it was more than anything I could imagine as we follow the powerful story of Isao and his goal to become the Elden Lord. Through sculpting, constant failing to pay attention, and using soap to defeat his enemies. Elden Ring's manga is a comedy, and for someone who can't get into Elden Ring except through some lore videos, this is one of the funniest manga I have ever read. The tone of Elden Ring's manga has the detail and artwork of an amazing seinen manga, but the jokes and humor of One Punch Man. Isao and the manga itself discredit the abundance of lore by making characters much more humorous, raging at the characters who speak vague sentences, and not wanting to enter into any dangerous environments. Isao is essentially a streamer who just wants to try out Elden Ring because everyone's talking about it, but once he realizes the absolute hell that is the lands between, he just wants to stop playing and go play Suika game. It's perfect for those who just like watching compilations of people having an awful time playing Elden Ring. That's what the manga encapsulates with its story and characters. However, there are manga that do not encapsulate the game it is licensed in any way. In fact, they make something so odd, bizarre, and quite frankly wrong in every way possible. Manga like Ratchet & Clank, Bang Bang Bang, Critical Danger of the Galaxy Legend. I grew up playing Ratchet & Clank. When people were playing Modern Warfare on the 360, I had Rack 3 Up Your Arsenal on the PS2. It may come as a surprise that a Western series like Ratchet had a manga, but the OG trilogy actually has quite the reputation. According to IGN, the original Ratchet released in Japan as the first Western game ever to be bundled in with a PlayStation 2, and stayed in the top 100 games list in Japan for the next 4 years. This manga was created in 2005, a year after that trilogy was completed. So I ask again, what have they done to you? What is this? Why? Upon reading the Ratchet manga, you are hit with the tropes and aesthetics of typical children's gag comedy. Not unknown to video game adaptations, Mario in his early and later licensed manga adopted this similar tone. comic strips of Mario in scenarios made into small, digestible, humorous anecdotes. Ratchet as a series has many comedic moments that resemble stories like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This manga is not that. Instead, it uses gags and jokes to make Ratchet and Clank the most vile, unlikable, and annoying characters imaginable. When Ratchet first arrives at a planet in the manga, he looks for somewhere to land his ship and decides upon seeing a large pile of debris to take out his bazooka and fire a missile at it, destroying it and injuring many people around it. The locals chastise him, which he replies by threatening to blow them up, which he does with a fart. Upon first meeting Clank, he then tries to eat him and fix him by swapping all his limbs around, threatening people in the streets, and fails to understand the concepts of food and currency. When presented with the opportunity to fight a monster in an arena to earn money, like in the games, Ratchet gets so excited, he pisses himself. If you haven't played the Ratchet games, this is not Ratchet. Ratchet's character through the games is a progress that can be easily understood. He can be selfish and uninterested in helping others unless for personal gain, but by the end of the first title, Ratchet realizes the value of helping others for nothing in return. The creator of the manga was a man called Shinbo Nomura, and he was known for making gag manga. Now, while I imagine this childlike toilet humor is appealing to someone out there, I don't know how in any way this promotes what the series is. This might be one of those things we lock in the vault and we don't talk about again. Ever. Now, while some licenses decide to play it so off the rails they become a borderline doujinshi, some others play it safe. Too safe. So safe, in fact, that you're basically just playing the game passively. Any JRPG manga, like Star Ocean or Luna. There are so many manga of games outside of Japan that feature to promo the latest games, like every Assassin's Creed, even doing a crossover chapter with Vinland Saga to promote Valhalla's release. You may be wondering, just like me, as this video has gone on, why? Why is there so much of these manga? Why is it so common? Money. Now, when I say money, I am not breaking any new ground here. And I don't think it's a more intelligent thing to say and be the smartest guy in the room because of that. I do think the answer is simple, but I want to offer an alternative to that answer, because I think what franchises do in Japan is alternatively more creative than what other franchises do elsewhere. In the beginning, I mentioned Japan's economic growth in the 80s. Today's historians described it as a miracle. Over time, however, the economic bubble burst and the risk of business ventures heightened. That being said, Japan is still home to the most profitable and successful franchise of media in history: Pokemon. Companies with successful IPs like Pokemon use their licenses in more ways than just manga, but instead on products that people of Japan would use in everyday life. Laundry detergent, chocolate, coffee, fashion, the list will go on if I keep going. Now, I can't correlate that the economic crisis of the 80s is the direct result of companies using their IPs in less risky ways and less creative ways. It's only a theory. These licensing deals of making manga based on video game IP are cheap and a much lower risk than creating a fully written, animated, voice-acted anime. While the manga industry is no small venture, creating manga tie-ins, collaborations, and series based on successful IP can yield a high return that brings in new fans or gives more to die-hard fans. It's also a better proof of concept to create something animated and fully fleshed out when it's based on an IP in a manga, when people have to go out and read it and interact and consume it. It's what they do with most anime. Now, I'm not here to say what companies should or shouldn't be doing with their licenses. It's their right, they own it. The only way you can decide whether or not they make more of it is if you consume it. It's also a company's job to be profitable, and if they make a stupid investment, they'll probably get a stupid return. That's how it is. While I look at some of the manga I've told you about, both good and interesting and weird, majority of them are based on IP I personally have experience with, and while some may be redundant and stop you from playing the game, or are so safe that there is nothing the adaptation brings, all of this can feel shallow, boring, and creatively disappointing. A lot of the best art is something that you can create because you're proud of it, and when you're happy with it, You can hopefully monetize it if you want to, so that if you want to keep doing it, you can. I think you'll find many sides of franchises that both want to create a good piece of fiction, but also not lose money doing so. It is a delicate balance, and I imagine it isn't very easy. Fans will buy their Zelda, Monster Hunter, and Pokemon as sure as the next installment. It is part of this franchise method for Pokemon especially to have the manga, anime, merch, and game all release sequentially. So, is that it? Is this just the reality of this bizarre manga web of video games? And was Dai the peak? Well, maybe not. While manga may just be an outlet for video game tie-ins and retellings, it is a far cry from the worst alternative that is franchises like the MCU. The MCU audience of today is a fraction of what it used to be. Pre-Endgame, the MCU was new and fresh and building as a franchise to end on an immensely huge and collaborative film that resounded popular culture. Nowadays, many of the shows and movies are being revoked, rewritten, recast, and reshot because of low box office returns and critical reception from both critics and fans. It's annoying how other IP, especially in the West, are following this method more and more. As much as I was excited to make this video and go down this rabbit hole, I actually don't like tie-ins and spin-offs of some of my favorite stories or any art or media I enjoy. And I know it's just a changing of the times, and it is very lucrative and hard to resist. But if this is going to happen regardless, I think manga is the best place for that. You don't have to read the .hack manga or watch the anime to play the game. If you can't be bothered trying to find a modern way to play Ocarina of Time, a manga can be a new gateway to that experience. If you're not good at games and would rather watch a perfect run of Persona 5, you have that manga right there. Experimentation, a fresh perspective, and a little risk can create amazing fucking art. And from that, make something brand new. Some of the most amazing titles, both games, manga, and more, came from someone adapting or remixing a license that was already there. Persona today is arguably a much bigger franchise in the West than its original series it spun off from, Shin Megami Tensei. Tensei, along with a series of games, has had many manga and light novels, but Tensei is actually adapted from a series of novels. Someone read these books and thought, I can make a game out of that. Because of this, we get really amazing remixes, like with Ralgrad and Blue Dragon. It's also one of the reasons why doujinshi, along with other reasons I can't mention, are actually extremely popular. As much as I think this Ratchet manga is wrong on so many levels as a fan, I love that it exists. So, fuck it. Give me a Berserk level detailed Super Mario manga. A chibi cooking story of Nier Replicant. Metal Gear Solid, but make it a shoujo romance with Otacon and Raiden. I want a Lord of the Rings manga in the style of One Piece. How about a new Breath of Fire with a new storyline not based on any of the games, with art from Yusuke Murata? For my outlet personally, much of what is on YouTube can feel repetitive and unoriginal, because of what people want to create is mostly based on things that are going to succeed. We are no different in that way compared to companies and franchises trying to make more money off their IP. But what we can do is the same thing. Look at what has already worked, both of our own work and others, and remix it in our own way to create something completely original. It's how inspiration works. I wrote this video idea down after seeing Bread Sword's video on licensed video games months ago. This video is in a way its own remix of his. And I think manga being the outlet for video game adaptations is a far cry better than the alternatives of creating something that no one feels like they have to consume, but they want to, because the people who remixed it and re-edited it and recreated their own version of something else did it with the same care and passion and love as the original. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and making it to the end of the video. There is so many more manga that I couldn't mention in this video, and it was very hard to cherry pick the ones that I wanted to show you. So if you want to see the entire list, there is a filter on Anime Planet, so you can go look for yourself of all the different video game manga. And if you feel like there's some that should be talked about and seen, feel free to let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, I really appreciate you liking and subscribing and sticking around for more videos. And if you're feeling more generous, you can support me over on Patreon. And for this video specifically, I want to thank our very first patrons, Big Nerd, Lenoriel, and Sentinel16. Thank you very much again for supporting the channel. But other than that, thank you for watching to the end. I really appreciate it. That's all from me. My name's Mugen. As always, have a good one.